Take me out to the ball game as we're heading back to Millennium to play baseball in the new event Prey Ball, Swing for the Grand Slam, this Tuesday, accompanying the two new permanent 3-star units, Part-Time Sumire and Rei. So, without further ado, here is a short review of our two new adorable students. Let's play ball! Kicking things off, we've got Millennium's fittest and most athletic student, Loba, since most of them couldn't exercise to save their life, unless it sends his pelvis on the line, who's taken up a part-time gig as a grape juice girl. It's Part-Time Sumire. Now, I've always liked Sumire, but not as much as certain students obviously, and while her part-time version hasn't propelled my love for her, it has definitely made me appreciate her even more, cause I really like her new work outfit. For one, I'm a fan of that casual white baseball shirt and those shorts. I think it really suits her, plus it exposes those beautiful, fit, bare legs that I want around my face. I also think that big hat as well as that tiny fanny pack on her waist make her look even cuter. But most importantly, I'm in love with her new twin-tailed hairstyle. I freaking love her normal version's ponytail, but something about her two long black twin tails just makes her look even more appealing, adorable, and prettier. Overall, I am digging her new sporty look. It's not as sexy as her regular versions, but it has its own charms. Extra points for having a purple aesthetic, and I hope that this new event is able to properly spotlight her character as something more other than a demon who just likes intense exercise. Finally, my god, her L2D is one of the best in the game. Like, look at that bright smile handing us grape juice in that sunset glow. What is it with Blue Archive and giving underappreciated characters such beautiful L2Ds? Also, the sports bra she's rocking with that open shirt is hot. Grape juice? More like I need her to grape me. So, what kind of student is she? Part-Time Sumire is a permanent special piercing supporter whose terrain modes are as follows: B combat power in urban terrains, S combat power in field, and D combat power indoors. The equipment she uses are gloves, bag and watch, with the gloves attack boost being particularly important for her kit. Now, how good is Part-Time Sumire? Well, she is the game's 4th weakness detection debuff applier, and like Miyu, she is a supporter. However, while the rest are strikers, she is the first one to be a special unit. Her role as a good weakness detection applier is mainly thanks to her EX skill, as with it, she can apply a decent weakness detection debuff onto one enemy that lasts for a respectable 20 seconds, being able to do so for a cheap 3 cost. And at max level skill, each time an ally attacks said enemy, this debuff deals additional damage equal to 13.2% of Part-Time Sumire's attack. Plus, this debuff can be triggered up to a max of 240 times, though the downside is that it cannot crit. Aside from that, her EX can also dish out a bit of decent yellow single target damage as a result of its 402% multiplier at level 5 skill, though it honestly isn't a lot and it's more of a nice bonus to have. While this EX has allowed Part-Time Sumire to become a pretty good weakness detection debuffer, she is somewhat weaker compared to her 3 striker counterparts, especially due to her EX's lower multipliers as well as her fairly low attack. Not to mention, as a special unit, she currently has access to less buffs from other units that can improve her EX's WD damage. Some examples being Swimsuit Saki/Swimsuit Kana special student sub attack buff, the universal sub skill attack buff, and Uniform Asuna's EX's attack buff. Unlike the other 3 who can benefit from Kisaki's EX skill damage buff, Kemhare's potent attack buff, Swimsuit Ui's yellow effectiveness buff, and many more, resulting in Sumire's damage output being generally lower than the other 3, though it can also vary depending on the situation. Moving on, while she lacks in damage output, Part-Time Sumire makes up for it by having team-wide buffs in the rest of her kit that also work well with her weakness detection debuff. Firstly, her basic skill increases the crit damage of 4 striker allies by 15.1% for 21 seconds at max level skill for every 100 crits landed by your students, with this skill having a 25-second cooldown between activations. The 100 crit threshold might seem pretty steep, but fortunately, due to Sumire's weakness detection debuff's hit count based nature, which highly requires you to use fast attacking / multi-hit units or auto attacking students, i.e. those units whose damage comes from their normal attacks and basic skills, you will be able to reach this requirement alignment much faster, subsequently helping to slightly further improve their damage output with this crit damage buff, though the 25-second cooldown can be pretty lengthy. Next, her sub-skill increases the crit damage of all piercing units in the team by 24.2% at level 10 skill, meaning that it only benefits units with yellow attack type, and combined with her basics buff, allows her to increase your unit's crit damage by a good 39.3%. So you would ideally use her in yellow armored content / a team with a piercing main damage dealer to make full use of this buff. However, while part-time Sumire also receives this buff, it isn't as effective on her since her weakness detection debuff cannot crit. Not to mention, this buff also sadly does not stack with the universal crit damage sub, which is a little bit weaker, so you also need to be careful with whom you pair her with. Not only that, both her Enhance and Enhance Skill Plus at UE40 increase her attack, which does directly boost the power of her debuff. However, her UE40 isn't a very important investment because even though it can improve her effectiveness as a weakness detection applier, she doesn't have any other offensive outlets aside from her EX. Thus, such a high amount of investment isn't necessary unless you plan to use her in difficult endgame content like harder difficulty raids. Lastly, her field terrain combat power is upgraded from S to SS at UE50, which again isn't necessary, especially since she is a special unit, plus it barely affects her weakness detection damage. Overall, part-time Sumire is a good special yellow weakness detection applier whose damage may be weaker than the other WD debuffers, but her real advantage over them lies in her ability to synergistically buff your team through her other skills. So, where can part-time Sumire be used in? Well, similar to the other weakness detection appliers, part-time Sumire has found her niche in the Wakamo Hovercraft raid, specifically phase 2 against the Hovercraft on Lunatic difficulty, where her role is to periodically implant a weakness detection debuff onto the Hovercraft, while partnering her with fast attacking DPS units in order to trigger her debuff as much as possible. Not only that, combined with the Hovercraft's 10-second 10% increase incoming damage debuff that it accumulates every 15 times it is attacked, allows her WD debuff to be stronger and slightly more potent. Plus, she'll be able to proc a basic quicker since again in this phase, you'll mainly be using AA DPS units or Mika, who has guaranteed crit to proc hers and the Hovercraft's debuffs, which subsequently allows her to buff their crit damage more frequently / consistently despite the 25-second cooldown. Not to mention, her sub will be handy at slightly improving your team's damage, especially in the regular yellow armored version of this raid. Finally, as a special unit, she is a bit more flexible as she can open up opportunities for different formations since you can bring in striker units to fulfill other roles, while also not needing to worry about armor mismatches against the Hovercraft's yellow attack on Insane the Lunatic, though the obvious disadvantage is that this special slot is already heavily contested with many meta hyper buffers, so you might have a tough time fitting her into your team. Hence, as you can tell, part-time Sumire has become a specialized unit for this raid, as seen in the previous Hovercraft Total Assault in JP, where she was brought into quite a lot of Sensei's Lunatic teams. Since this difficulty requires way more teams to clear it, being mainly used in these Sensei's later formations. This is because the other weakness detection debuffers, especially PJ and Noah, are prioritized as the appliers for your earlier teams due to their way higher damage output. Plus, yellow DPS units like Mika, Uniform Neru, etc. are also preferred for your main teams due to the sheer overwhelming power, and she is more of a DPS option that you use in your cleanup teams to beat this difficulty. Meanwhile, for the other difficulties, she saw almost little to no use since the main strat is to just blast through phase 2 using Mika, PJ Noah alongside your AA / fast attacking units, while also utilizing other units in your special slot, though you can obviously still use her on any of these difficulties if you want / need to. So overall, should you pull for part-time Sumire? Well, in my opinion, if you plan on taking the next Wakamo Hovercraft raid more seriously, perhaps you want to attempt Lunatic and you need an extra WD applier for one of your teams, or maybe you don't have any weakness detection appliers and you want one for whatever reason you might have, then sure, you may pull for her. However, I personally feel you should skip her, especially if you don't plan on taking on Lunatic Wakamo Hovercraft, since she has only been used on this difficulty and you can just borrow / use any of the other stronger weakness detection debuffers / rely on Mika to get past the difficulties aside from Lunatic. Not to mention, there are also other upcoming units in the next few weeks that are more important. So with all these, I personally think you should skip part-time Sumire and just save your Paroxysm lanes instead. But if you're one of the few Sumire bros who's loved our beautiful underrated students since the start, and you want this gorgeous L2D where she flashes you with a smile brighter than the sun, then go ahead and pull for your waifu. Moving on, we have the trial member of the athletics training club who loves baseball despite being dog shit at it. It's none other than Rei. Now, I may not know anything about baseball cause I'm a football fanatic. For my football fans, I support Chelsea, but I do know that Rei is 100% a cutie pie. Firstly, I really like her sporty look, especially the blue baseball jacket and cap. In my opinion, it adds a layer of coolness to her, and that short hoodie that exposes those tired injured legs full of white bandages is really sexy too. I just wanna hug them and sing "Pain, Pain, Go Away" like Hina. But my favorite aspect of the design has to be her orange hair. While I'm not a huge fan of the color, I love the two long strands drooping on her shoulders as well as the short bob cut like hairstyle. I think she looks cute, and I'm glad it's not too short cause otherwise I probably wouldn't like it. Also, can't forget that tiny bandage on her face. It amplifies her adorableness by like 1000%. All in all, I really like Rei's baseball inspired look. I'm glad she's finally playable even though she's only appeared in like one event so far, and I feel this new event will help us appreciate her even more. Cause while she is an absolute girl failure, I can tell she's trying her very best to improve her terrible baseball skills, as evident by her bandages and her goal of reaching a 0.10 batting average, which is fucking awful by the way, and honestly, I think that's very endearing. Now, what type of student is she? Rei is a permanent sonic DPS striker with great armor, whose terrain moves are B affinity in urban terrains, D in field, and S in indoor terrains. Plus, she rocks hat, pin, and watch for her equipment, similar to a number of damage dealers, with the hat and watch improving her offensive capabilities. So, let's talk about Rei's skills. Firstly, she is primarily a pretty good purple AoE damage dealer who not only has the 4th highest attack in the game since she's a rocket launcher user, but she also has a strong simple kit that focuses on dealing AoE damage while buffing herself, with her main source of damage being her EX skill. With it, she is able to deal good purple AoE damage to enemies in a round-shaped area with its 401% multiplier at max level skill, and its radius is actually fairly wide, being able to do this for an average 4 cores. While her EX's multiplier doesn't seem that great, it's somewhat compensated by her very high attack. Plus, the other skills in her kit can help to further boost her EX's damage. Firstly, her basic skill, which procs whenever she defeats 4 enemies, increases her attack speed by a massive 57.3% at level 10 skill for a decent 20 seconds, while also granting herself 1 stack of out with a 10-second cooldown between activations. This attack speed self buff can be very beneficial for her, especially since she uses a rocket launcher with only 1 ammo per mag. So with this potent buff, she can launch her AoE auto attacks at a faster rate, in turn further improving her capabilities as a sonic AoE DPS unit. Not to mention the outstack that she gains directly synergizes with her sub skill. More on this in a bit. Next, her enhanced skill increases her crit, whereas at UA 40, her enhanced skill plus provides her with an additional crit damage boost. While the crit buff is pretty decent, though it ain't exactly the fanciest, the extra crit damage buff at UA 40 can be quite useful, particularly when taking on harder endgame content, though it isn't as necessary if you don't plan on doing so. Moving on, with her sub skill, she passively increases her sonic effectiveness by a whopping 65.6% at max level skill. Plus, after accumulating 3 out stacks, she consumes all of it to reduce the cost of her own next EXQ use by 3, -1 cost from level 1 to 6, and -2 from level 7 to 9. Like I mentioned, this skill goes hand in hand with her basic, cause you gain the outstacks from the latter, so you would need her basic to proc thrice in order for the former's cost reduction to activate, meaning you need to defeat minimum 12 enemies for 3 stacks, and it will also take at least 30 seconds for her sub's cost discount to proc cause of her basic's 10-second cooldown. This huge cost reduction, especially at level 10 skill, can be massive massively useful, since it essentially reduces her 4-cost EX down to a measly 1, allowing for faster, smoother rotations as you can activate her EX much quicker. So combine this with the permanent potent sonic effectiveness buff she gains with this skill, subsequently improves her ability to clear out scores of purple mobs. Finally, at UE50, her indoor combat power upgrades from S to SS. And again, this better terrain mood will be a good boost to her damage, which is mostly needed if you plan on using her in higher difficulty content. All in all, Rei is a pretty strong purple AoE DPS unit whose synergistic kit allows her to buff herself while also massively reducing the cost of her EX skill around every 30 seconds, so that she can defeat enemies quicker and more consistently using her AoE EX and normal attacks. Now, where can Rei be used in? Well, while she is a good sonic AoE damage dealer who is powerful enough to take out groups of purple enemies thanks to her high multipliers and attack stat as well as a few potent self buffs, she definitely isn't as strong as a number of other purple AoE DPS units. Plus, combined with her kit's nature of needing to defeat a lot of enemies, makes her more suited to take on content that contain a bunch of easily defeatable purple enemies, aka mobs, as opposed to using her against a group of purple enemies with a lot of HP. Examples are the Parallel Minions, the Chiton Rangers, etc. Like, her damage against them is still decent, but she can't compete against someone like Swimsuit Hanako, Ichika, Nozomi, etc. As such, Rei is primarily used as a good purple mobber, and she can be brought into content with tons of purple mobs. Most notably, her main use so far since her release lies in Tifareth, the new final restriction boss who's coming to global pretty soon. I won't go through the entire raid's mechanics, but essentially Tiff has 3 circular cores, each having their own different mechanics, and he will always activate 2 of them at certain periods, while summoning 4 laborers, i.e. purple mobs, to protect these cores. Thus, you need to bring in powerful AoE DPS units depending on his armor type to take out these laborers, especially because Tiff takes 1% damage and his groggy gauge is filled for each mob defeated. Plus, when he shuts down the activated cores, he will recall all laborers, and for each surviving one recalled, he restores a little bit of health. So this is where Rei comes in as an excellent unit, having this simple role of easily taking out these laborers with a wide powerful EX, while helping a little with rotations by decreasing her cost. Plus, she takes less damage from his yellow attack from floor 50 and above, not to mention her great affinity in his indoor terrain. This was seen in the previous purple Tifareth in JP, where quite a number of senseis brought her into their teams, even for the really harder stages like floor 100 and above, though you would certainly need at least UE30 Rei for these higher floors, pairing her with other AoE DPS units like Dress Sayori and Nozomi, but her pick rate compared to the two was somewhat lower due to their higher damage output, as well as buffers like Rio who can copy her EX and even reduce her cost to 0. Aside from Tifareth, she could be used in Purple Grand Assault Indoor Cheese to perform the same role, clear out Cheese's minions, though I personally haven't seen her be used a lot in this raid, even in the previous one a few months ago, possibly cause she takes more damage from the mob's raid attack on Insane and above, while having to compete with other Sonic AoE DPS units like Swimsuit Hanako and Dress Sayori. But again, she is still a solid option to bring into phase 1 if you need to. Other than those, she might be useful for Indoor Purple/Blue Gauss phase 1 to quickly clear out the minions he summons so that your team can focus on the boss, though she will take 2 times damage from his raid attack. And finally, she has seen some use in certain joint firing drills, specifically the ones with the many purple robot mobs. Overall, should you pull for Rei? Well, if you want to really take on Tifareth when he arrives to global, perhaps you want to tackle the harder stages like floor 90+, or maybe you just want an additional purple AoE damage dealer for whatever other content that needs these units, possibly cause you don't have any/only a few, then in my opinion, sure, you may pull for her. However, you may also skip her, especially if you don't plan to take on Tifareth seriously or at all. I know a bunch of people don't really do final restriction since there aren't any Paroxysm rewards. Not to mention Dress Sayori and Nozomi, both of whom are the superior Sonic AoE damage dealers for this boss, are arriving soon, with the former's banners debuting literally right after this event, so you can utilize them instead, or you can even just rely on Swimsuit Hanako too. Thus, I personally feel you may skip her and save your Paroxysms for other more important upcoming units. But if Rei is your waifu and you want to help her increase her batting average while admiring our cutie patootie in her beautiful L2D, then go ahead and pull for her. And that's all for this review. Thanks for watching, let me know who you're pulling for if you are, and I'll see y'all in the next one.